As a platform for the voices of society, our Transform Kenya Forum will discuss standardization and its impact on the economy in our country across the board. Join our panel as they discuss and share about standardization live from Daystar University Nairobi campus, Valley Road. Follow the conversation on our social media platforms to share about standardization and how it can help grow our economy. Transform Kenya. Empower our nation.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight for yet another edition of Transform Kenya. If you're joining us on KTN News, thank you very much for joining us on yet another exciting edition of Transform Kenya, an initiative by Standard Group that helps provide a platform to have very pertinent conversation on serious issues affecting our society and economy at large, and of course come up with necessary considerations. From the food you eat, to the vehicles you use, to even the toothpick you use at home, the environment and security standards have to be observed. This is why tonight we focus on standardization as our major topic. What is it? Why is it important? How are the processes? What will we need as a country to achieve the international standards? And how do we align ourselves with both regional and international markets? Tonight, I'm not just steering this ship alone. My colleague Sharon Momanyi is with us. You as our audience, consumers and stakeholders will have a chance to give your insights on this particular topic. Sharon.
Indeed, Akisa, and standards seek to answer the fundamental question: what is the best way of doing this? Whether it involves products, service, or processes, what is the best way of doing it? And the conversation we have tonight will be really surrounding the concerns and questions around this fundamental question of the best way of doing it. And even as we were driving towards this forum tonight, one of the big questions that Kenyans have been asking and want to be addressed tonight is another big part of this conversation. There's a quality assurance part of it, and then there's a counterfeit part of it. In the recent past, we have seen very fundamental and basic products counterfeited in the market, from pads, from sugar, you name it. And the Kenyans want to know, what are the measures to guard against this? So this is a very important conversation that we are having tonight. Remember, if you're watching us from home or following this conversation on our online platforms, you can join in. Ask us any question that you want us to direct to our panelists tonight or to the audience. We have great and fundamental representation in manufacturing and in industry in the country. So share with us this conversation. You can tweet at Akisa Wandera, at Sharon_Momanyi, at KTN News, using the hashtag TransformKenyaSG. That is the hashtag through which you can be able to trace this conversation. And let's keep it alive and active tonight. Akisa.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we have all the necessary voices in this particular sector joining us, not just here as panels, but also among our crowd, and our audience rather, and we'll be giving everyone a chance to just give insights on what are some of the issues that they would need to be addressed on this particular issue. I'll quickly start by introducing our panelists tonight. On my immediate left, we had Bernard Nguyo, the Acting Managing Director of the Kenya Bureau of Standards. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. We also have Mr. Elmer Halake, who's Executive Director of the Anti-Counterfeit Agency. Thank you for being with us tonight. We have, definitely, thank you very much. We also have Betty Minor, the PS, Principal Secretary, State Department of Industry. Glad to have you here tonight with us. We have Benjamin Langwen, the Vice Chairperson, Consumer Federation of Kenya. Thank you for being here. And for the voice of the SME, we have Maxwell Kimeli Sawe, the Senior Operations Manager at Sous Chef Limited. Thank you for being with us. And finally, Mr. Sergio Mujika, the Secretary General of the International Organization for Standardization. Thank you. We'd definitely love to hear what are these international standards and how is Kenya aligning itself to it. I'd quickly like to thank our sponsors, the Kenya Bureau of Standards, for deciding that this is a very important conversation to have and supporting us. We'd also like to thank the Ministry of Trade for being part of this, as well as Daystar University for providing the space that we have now. Quickly, let's get into the conversation now. I think I would love to start with a woman on the panel, P.S. Betty Maina. Once again, thank you for joining us. Let's just begin with, how is Kenya in terms of maintaining standards? How far have we come? Where are we?
Thank you very much, and thank you for this for this session. I think to start with, Kenya believes and strongly affirms the role of standards in product development, in service delivery, and to do this, we have established the Bureau of Standards, which is an organization that is the one national body responsible for working with other stakeholders to develop standards. And once those standards are developed, then it is also our responsibility to enforce it by ensuring that products that are produced in Kenya or imported into Kenya comply with those standards. So we have fairly rigorous regimes for confirming that. And once we've done that, we also go into the market on a regular basis to engage in market surveillance and confirm that goods that are being sold are conform to standards. So we have that regulatory role. But I think it's important to emphasize that the responsibility for ensuring that goods comply with standards lie with the producers of those goods, lie with the importers, and the role of the Bureau of Standards is to regulate it. But all producers, all manufacturers, all importers must ensure that the goods that they are putting into the market comply with the established Kenya standards.
Well, there are international standards, definitely, and then we talk about local standards. I think maybe we should just start by the ISO. What is it? Why is it important?
Good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this fascinating conversation. ISO is the International Organization for Standardization. We were created in the year 1947, right after World War II, because already at that time it was well understood that if we wanted to rebuild the world, we needed international standards. We have 164 members, and probably one of the key messages from me to you this evening is that ISO is here in Kenya, and our member is KEBS, and we work very closely together to have a very strong voice from Kenya in the standard development process around the world. What do? We create international standards. And your colleague was asking at the beginning of the panel, what's the best way to do things? Well, we believe that that answer lies in the best international experts around the world, because our standards are not written in my office in Geneva. The standards are written by international experts appointed by our members. So that's the key responsibility we have in our hands, to participate in the standard development process, to get together the best experts, and to define, working together, what's the best way to do things.
So then, why is it important for a country, like you say, Kenya is a member of ISO through KEBS. Why is it important for a country to be a member?
It's important because if you are a member of ISO, you have a voice in the standard development process. International standards are going to affect you anyway, whether we like it or not. But you can be a good standard taker. Take those standards and put it in place here in Kenya. But you have the unique opportunity to be a standard maker. And that's the benefit that brings you being part of the ISO system.
Well, we're glad to hear that Kenya is part of the voice is heard out there as far as ISO is concerned. So to you, Mr. Nguyo, being the acting managing director of KEBS, how do we develop our standards here locally? How are the processes, just for our audience to understand?
Thank you for having me. Now, the process of developing standards is consensus-based. And basically, because when you're talking about a standard, you are looking at a set of requirements that either a product or a process or a service needs to comply with in order to assure that that product will meet the expectations of the consumer. Mm-hmm. So in that, you find that to come up with a standard that will meet the expectations of the consumers and other stakeholders, then they must be engaged in the process of developing standards. Kenya Bureau of Standards acts as a secretariat, basically coordinating this process of getting together the various stakeholders, experts in a particular product or service, other stakeholders that, like the consumers of the products and the services. You are aware that our constitution requires that consumers be provided with goods of reasonable quality. So the interests of the consumers are key when it comes to the process of developing standards. Then we have other stakeholders like the regulators, research institutions, because the standards must also be cognizant of the fact that technologies and methods of doing things are changing constantly. So they must address the current needs and also our future needs where it's possible. So when you identify all these stakeholders, you put them together in technical committees. And these technical committees will basically discuss the draft standards through the various stages of refinement. And once the technical committees come up with a document that is ready, it is then exposed to the public for comments and views, taken back after they give their views to the technical committees, who will basically be able to analyze those views and incorporate those that it is possible to incorporate. Before then, it is subjected to a process of approval. And the approval in this case, it's done by the National Standards Council as required by law. And once it is now gazetted, it becomes a national standards which now should be implemented.
So then would you describe this process here in the country as watertight?
Yes, the process is effective in achieving the objectives, because throughout the entire process, there are checks and balances to ensure that whatever comes out as a standard has taken into account the requirements and the needs that that particular product or service should comply with.
Let's hear from COFEC. As you've rightly put it, the Constitution says that consumers really should be provided with goods of reasonable quality, of good quality, if you like it. He says, of course, that we have good processes. From the Consumer Federation of Kenya, what are your thoughts?
Thank you very much. From the consumer perspective, this could be a turning point, because consumers in this country have not been really participating effectively in the process of standard formulations. And yet, at the end of the day, these standards are affecting the consumers. Because currently what has been happening in this country is that the so-called technical committees are constituted from the regulatory agencies. They sit down, they formulate the standards, and then they push it to the consumer. So we have to have a turning point. The consumer is critical in each and every standard, and at each and every level, so that the consumer is part of the formulation process, and eventually when the standard is rolled out, the consumer has continuously to be informed, to be educated, so that even those who did not participate in the standard formulation, they should be made to be aware, to be knowledgeable about that particular standard.
Speaking about public awareness, there's also the very big issue, unsettling issue of counterfeit products that I would like it to be addressed by the executive director here of the Anti-Counterfeit Authority. There have been concerns about the influx of counterfeit goods in the country, especially imports. What is the authority doing to just reduce or completely eradicate this particular problem?
Thank you very much. The Anti-Counterfeit Authority in 2018 got a miscellaneous, through a miscellaneous amendment act. We are now the anti-counterfeit authority, not agency any longer. We are going through a rebranding. Now, in regard to your question around what we are doing around controlling the imports, first, in terms of our mandate, we exist to combat counterfeiting, and counterfeiting is infringement of intellectual property rights. These are people who want to ride on innovation and creativity of other people. And therefore, counterfeiting can take place at two levels. It can happen at the local level in terms of there can be local counterfeiters or counterfeiting of products. And we can also get a counterfeit product coming through imports into our country. Now, in terms of the imports, which is actually the major problem we have, what we are doing is we are putting in very stringent border controls, both at the seaport, which is the main entry of goods into our country, and of course at the airports, mainly the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport and the Eldoret Airport, in addition to the land borders. So we are now in all these border points. We are not by ourselves, we are together with other government agencies. As you are aware, in May last year, government put in a multi-agency team to crack on illicit trade, including counterfeits, and largely we've seen a lot of benefits in terms of goods seized. We are talking about estimated goods of almost around 5 billion. 1.6 was what was destroyed in the river, if you recall, by the president in July last year. And in terms of what we've seized almost 1.8 billion as anti-counterfeit authority. And out of that, we've been able to destroy 800 million of those goods. 850 million of those goods are still going to go through the legal process, that is in terms of the court process. And generally, we've been able to make a lot of efforts. Besides that, we've been also able to strengthen the legal framework through a Miscellaneous Amendment Act 2018, and we've made counterfeiting very punitive, and we've put a lot of disincentive in terms of penalty to it. So besides that, very important is the point around awareness to the consumers, which is one of our key mandates. And we are saying an educated public is a knowledgeable public. And therefore we are investing collaboratively as multi-agency and as individual institution to make sure that the consumer is aware and sensitized on the problem of counterfeiting and generally illicit goods.
Well, we're glad to have some of them here tonight. A little bit later, it will be interesting to hear what some of the consumers have to say, especially about issues surrounding what you've talked about, counterfeit goods. We also have a representative of businesses on the panel, just to make it a little bit holistic. Maxwell Kimelisawe is the operations manager at the Sous Chef Limited, one of the companies that are said to be certified completely by KEBS. How has experience been for you from just starting the entire process of standardization and getting certified at the end of the day? How was the process for Sous Chef Limited?
Thank you very much. Sous Chef Limited went through a rigorous process through the certification. And we must acknowledge that certification has brought us so much of success and so much of benefits as part of the end game when you are going for certification. Though it has its own challenges, especially as from an SME, is that we Sous Chef got an advantage of having a sponsored program by the ITC and Kenya Bureau of Standards. And we got the advantage of going through the the initial processes of documentations, gaps, analysis, and all that done by seconded group of consultants from Kenya Bureau of Standards. With that, it took a lot of burden from us. But I must say that for those who you are applying as an individual, it's not cheap, yeah? So it has its own financial challenges. Okay. It's straining much. And for sous chef, we were able to do this in a quite not easy way.
You talk about, yes, sorry to cut you short, you talk about it being a very rigorous process. What did you have to go through?
First of all, the infrastructure that you have, you have to make sure you first fit to the standards as to the facility you have, the equipments you have. What you have as an SME might not necessarily help you or, force you through the process. For us, we have to invest in equipments because standards have their own measure. In a kitchen, you are told the best table to use is a stainless steel table. It's the best to use. It's not cheap to get a stainless steel equipment. So you have to invest money in making sure that this happens. Two, you have to go through a process of staff training. Competence is a very important aspect when implementing a system. So you have most of the SMEs, we don't, maybe you say you don't employ the high-end people. You have others who maybe gone to class 8, primary school education because it's small business. Some of the things you do is by hand. You only need to teach them how to do it. So which means you have to make sure that you train these people to understand why standards are necessary. Two, these are companies that are owned by individuals. So if the owner does not buy the idea that the standards are important, the systems are important, then still it will be hard for you to implement. So you have to go through training from top management to the lowest level in a company. And you notice again, certification fee, not small amounts. Noticing that most of the SMEs don't make this big money. Whatever the money you make is only for your own operational cost, maybe as you start. So you have to make sure you have a good budget to implement all these. Trainings are not cheap. Equipments, buying and maybe like replacing what you have is not cheap. And again, by the end of it, you notice it does not only affect you, but even your own supplies. Whoever that you source materials from have to go through, they have to fit in some criteria. Yeah, so you have to set all the documentation, the parameters that are required. So it goes beyond you as an SME, but you have to go again back to where you source your materials.
So what you're saying is achieving standards is very expensive in this country. So then when we get back, it is some questions, at least we have a government representation here in KEBS. It'll be a question I would really like you to answer. But also if you want to chime in into this conversation, we are on Twitter on #TransformKE. You can tweet us at Sharon_Momanyi. You can tweet me at Akisa Wandera. The conversation here is on standardization. What do you need to know about it? Why is it important? How is Kenya aligning itself to achieving international standards? And majorly, when we get back, we'll be talking about what does this mean for businesses, not just corporates, but also small and medium-sized businesses. What Mr. Maxwell Kimeli-Sawe here is talking about, that achieving standards could be very expensive. Well, in a few minutes on KTN, we'll be having KTN Leo. We're taking a short break for us to just air the news for about 30 minutes to give our guests and our audience time, of course, to just refresh a bit. And when we get back, Very exciting topics lined up. What does standardization mean for consumers? There have been a lot of people who've complained about the processes. They've talked about it being rigorous. They've talked about it being very expensive and very tough regulations. We'd love to hear from consumers and other players that are with us here today, like the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. We have the Kenya Accreditation Service. We have COFEC on the team here. So it is a holistic conversation we are having here on Transform Kenya at the Daystar University. I would like us to break for the KTN Leo News on KTN, both KTN Home and KTN News. And then when we get back, we shall continue with this conversation. This is Transform Kenya. Stay with us.
As a platform for the voices of society, our Transform Kenya Forum will discuss standardization and its impact on the economy in our country across the board. Join our panel as they discuss and share about standardization live from Daystar University Nairobi campus, Valley Road. Follow the conversation on our social media platforms to share about standardization and how it can help grow our economy. Transform Kenya.